Baker. I am your One Team Everest representative, here to be your go-between with our ancillary services. Today we are spotlighting All Valley Escrow, and we are so excited to have them today. We have one of our fabulous escrow officers with us, Miss Tina Patronet. I'll let her introduce herself, but I just wanted to let you know that we are here to be a resource for you in any way that you need. Obviously, you're important to our family with All Valley Escrow, Inspiro Financial, and Seller's Choice NHD. We have 3 fantastic services in which to provide for you. So please remember us when you're out there on those transactions. And I'm going to pitch it over to Tina to just tell you a little bit about herself.
Thank you.
Go ahead. You're welcome.
Thanks, Kendall.
Of course.
Hi guys, I'm Tina Patronet. I've been in escrow for 20 years now. I started out, I did have my real estate license years ago, and then I was a TC. So I handled a lot of the paperwork. So it was a good fit for me to move into escrow since I kind of knew the paperwork, contracts, all of that. So I've been doing this. I love it. Every escrow is different, and I like that. I like the interaction between the buyers, the sellers, the lenders, everybody that's involved, and it's different every time. So it's always an experience and always fun. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Just so you know, Tina does sit in our Simi Valley office. We have a couple different branches with All Valley. One, of course, in Valencia with Freed, right upstairs from our offices there. Everybody right now is technically sitting in Simi because of everything we went through with COVID last year, but normally we do have branches in Westlake Village as well. So hopefully things will get a little bit back to normal, but right now we just have our Simi Valley group and Freed in Santa Clarita. So just want to give you some insight as to where your branches are. We know that you guys very often get asked questions when your buyers and sellers receive a package from escrow after you open escrow. And quite often you're their resource, so they call you first and say, what is all of this stuff that I just received? So Tina and I thought it would be a great idea to kind of go through those forms one by one today. I'll be sharing my screen so that you can follow along. Please know that we do not expect you to become complete professionals about all of these forms. We are here to do that for you. We encourage you to put your clients in contact with us. Tina could probably walk your clients through it in her sleep at this point, given all her experience. And it is something that we do very, very often. So please always encourage your clients to reach out with us. We are doing a lot over the phone, much less in person because of COVID still. But if they want a Zoom call or a FaceTime, there's so much technology available to us that we utilize to make this process a little bit more face-to-face. Any of those are available options to you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start screen sharing, and bear with me. Hopefully technology works the way I want it to. So let's see. Perfect. That was way too smooth. Can you guys see everything on my screen? Can you see the documents? If your camera's on, can you give me a thumbs up or just put in the chat?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Awesome. We're going to go ahead and start with this package right here, which Tina's going to go ahead and head off. Is this the buyer or seller stack that we're starting?
This is the buyer stack. So just so you guys know, once we get escrow open and we try to get the escrow instructions out to the buyers and the sellers, 24 to 48 hours, depending on when it was opened and how soon we can get them out. But we really are shooting for 24 hours these days to see if we can get those out. So what we do is we do have a list of items on the cover sheet to the buyer that just kind of shows what is included in the package. And most importantly, down at the bottom, it does say to please return these within 5 business days. So, you know, usually we're in a time frame for closing. Sometimes it's 20 days, sometimes it's 45 days, but the sooner we get all of these documents back from the buyer and the seller, then we are able to move forward and do our job and order all the necessary insurances and documents and demands and all that to move forward. So it's really important. And if you can help us by stressing to your clients that you're going to get a package, complete it, ask questions, get it back as soon as possible so that we can give the lender what they need and they can do their stuff too as far as the loan. So that's just the cover sheet, pretty self-explanatory. Our phone number, our information's at the top if they have any questions on there. And basically, let's move on to page 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to encourage you guys, if you have any questions at any point, we try to make these a very friendly, open environment. So feel free to either use the chat feature, raise your hand if you want to share your question vocally, that's fine too. We will be watching that. So please feel free to stop us if you have questions about the documents we're explaining at the time. Okay, so we went over the cover page and now a wire fraud advisory. This issue just does not seem to be going away, does it? Wire fraud.
No, it doesn't. Fortunately, we have not seen any current instances of wire fraud, but it's an ongoing disclosure to please, please, please tell your clients about wire fraud. It is rampant on the internet sometimes, and even on your cell phone and text. So we do have a disclosure on here about wire fraud, what it is, how you can prevent it. Please obtain phone numbers. Do not wire funds unless you've called your escrow officer to confirm the information in the wire instruction that we have sent you encrypted. And if we have tried, there's so many different buyers that don't know how to use internet, or they don't know how to open encrypted. So we can even fax it to a landline number. We also have been giving that information over the phone if we have to, as long as we've confirmed who the buyer is. You know, we'll ask them some questions just to make sure that we're talking to them. So very important. It's just a disclosure. We can't say it enough. Please, we don't want to scare everybody, but you know, we don't want any wire fraud happening. So it's just a disclosure to sign and be aware of it, and they understand that there is wire fraud out there.
And just so you know, with All Valley Escrow, we contact your clients as soon as we open escrow and introduce ourselves to them. It's very important, especially in this day and age. Everybody's communicating via email, and that's one of the most vulnerable ways in which wire information or wire fraud is attacked. And so we make contact immediately so that they know who Tina is, what her email address is. It is on our stationery and letterhead, but unfortunately, you know, crooks out there get creative and they try to copy our email addresses, and you know, it's happened. Frankly, it just has happened before. And so although this may seem like a reiteration of a warning you're already giving your clients, please know we always want them to still be aware of the fact that it is a risk, and we want them to know that we are here, and you know, telling them, hi, my name's Tina, welcome to escrow, here's my phone number, you're going to be hearing from me throughout this transaction. Let's connect via email so that they know we're the actual right people for them to be talking to. And always encourage your clients to confirm with escrow before they send in their funds, because that's also another place where it happens. So that's, again, what that's for. Ooh, email encryption.
Yeah, I won't, yeah, it's a big one, but you know what, I don't know, when you go into too much detail, it just kind of explains how our encrypted email system works and how you get a passcode, and it's so secure. And once you get that passcode, you can go back into the actual email to open it up and get those wiring instructions or any other document that has personal data on it. Especially things with your social security, your phone number, your address, anything like that, we do like to send encrypted so that it's not out there for other people to, you know, to take advantage of. So this is an email that goes out to the buyer and the seller in the package, and it just explains, you might get an email, you're not going to be able to see the content until you follow the directions and open it. We've had a pretty good success with this. You know, there are obviously people that don't know how to open the emails, or they're trying to do it on their phone and it doesn't work, or if they're on a smartphone or versus an Apple, sometimes there is a little bit of disconnect. But we encourage them to try and open them, and if they can't, we find another way to work it out. But it's just kind of explains the system. But when we send the email, we also have it in that document too on how to open it. So yeah, hopefully it helps them. It's just another piece of information to show them, you know, how to open it encrypted, and to let them know that their information's safe.
Yeah, we take it very seriously in keeping their information safe and protected. Yeah. And this can sometimes be a frustration because everyone's running so quick and wants to just scroll through their phones and open attachments. But understand this is actually a safety measure in place for their protection because of, you know, personal information that is exchanged quite often on escrow documents. So please know that we are here to, again, walk them through if it becomes an issue. And this is just another piece that explains that. Next, let's move on. Our next form, our resale escrow instructions.
So our resale escrow instructions, this information, as you guys know, it's all obtained from the purchase contract that you guys have provided to us. So it's not all of the information from the purchase contract, but it is the escrow holders instructions on what we're responsible for. And it ties in all of the stuff from the purchase contract. So if it's not in the escrow instructions, but it's in the purchase contract, it's still a part of a valid contract. So sometimes people ask me that, they say, well, it doesn't say in here that I get to keep the patio furniture. Well, that's not really an escrow function to make sure the patio furniture is handled, but it does say down in the last paragraph here that it is we coincide, we work together with the residential purchase contract. So just know that this is just your basic escrow instructions that tell the highlights of the actual contract.
So it doesn't supersede anything or negate anything obviously agreed to in the
Right.
contract. It's just in addition to for escrow clarification and obviously clarifying what our responsibilities are.
Correct.
A great question from the Santa Clarita Conference Room. Do the buyer and seller get the same escrow instructions?
They do get the same resale escrow instructions. There are some other documents that go in with the package that pertain to the buyer or the seller, like a lot of the 1099 reporting information. That would be like on the seller side, but these are the exact same. And if you look at the bottom, the buyer and the seller both sign these. They can be signed in counterpart, but they're the exact same instructions that go to the buyer and the seller.
That's a great question. So we send one packet out to the buyer, one packet out to the seller. You'll see some documents are duplicated, like these escrow instructions, for example, and then some forms that are specific to just each party. So you'll see here, obviously, we cover the preliminary title report. Touching on that point, I know Tina had mentioned we try and get our opening packages out within 24 to 48 hours. A way to ensure that we get those out as quickly as possible is actually having that preliminary title report in ahead of time. So if you are in a position where you're the listing agent and you're dictating services, obviously we hope your escrow is going to be with All Valley. Get your prelim ordered, send it over to your escrow officer, send it over to Tina, send it over to whoever's on your team. Just say, okay, here's my prelim. Hang on, when I get the purchase contract, I'll follow up and then you're ready to fly. So in this market, we all know stuff is going as quickly as it gets listed. And so all that more important to get your preliminary title report ordered at listing. And for that matter, get your NHD report ordered as well. I can absolutely order that for you and hand it over to your escrow officer as well.
Go ahead to the top of the page. I just wanted to comment on one thing. The escrow instructions are basically, well, you can see Mark Brown, excuse me, is my buyer, and it'll also tell the seller's name, William Smith. But really, the terms of the transaction are very important. So make sure the purchase price is right in those. If there's any discrepancies, let us know. But those terms come directly from your purchase contract, page 1. And that kind of dictates, the purchase price and how much loan, and it dictates the fees too, because fees are based on the purchase price, or the lender bases their title policy fees on the loan amount. So it's important that we have those right. And we can correct, we can amend, we can do whatever once, because that number does change a lot. The first trust deed amount, that'll change sometimes, which is just no big deal. It's just an amendment that we draw, but we do need to know what those items are so that we base our fees upon those amounts.
Awesome, great point, Tina. All right.
And then page 2, just like you said, it puts in your admin processing fee. It puts in your disclosures that we're going to be ordering. I don't know how much detail you want. Anytime there's a home warranty, we put in the basics on that. We put in the information about they need fire insurance. The prelim is very important. And the other important thing would be HOA dues and documents, transfer documents. As long as the prelim is very important, obviously, but the HOA documents, you guys have a time frame usually that says, 10 days, I think, sometimes in the contract that you got to be provided with. Remove your contingencies that have the HOA. So the HOA is important when we're opening. We need to get the upfront money, if there is, from the seller as soon as possible so that we can get those HOA docs ordered and find out if there's anything in them, and also to provide them to the buyer so that they can review them. So that's really important that we get those back. Most agents, which you guys have been great on, is getting us the HOA information. We find out if there's an upfront fee and we get a check or a credit card right away and get that stuff ordered, because it is in your contingencies. Yeah. And if those are going to be removed, we need to get those docs in.
The clock is ticking right away, as you well know. So we're here to get everything expedited for you. Escrow is such a domino effect where you want to run, but you kind of need a couple dominoes in place to do so, like the management company and HOA, like the upfront fee, like the preliminary title report, all of those things. So please know our job here is to hopefully be proactive with you in going through this so that we can all close smoothly and efficiently. All right, let's keep going.
I was going to say, really, escrow instructions are 7 pages long, 7 to 8. But to be honest with you, the first 2.5 pages are really pertaining to your escrow. So those are the items that you're instructing escrow to handle and to do. And those are pertaining to this specific escrow. once we get past page 2, don't be afraid, because that really ends our information. And then the general provisions are just information about how escrows run, what happens for different instances of how we handle documents, how we handle signers, how we handle funds, what's a sub escrow. It's descriptions, it's general provisions, it's reference, it's a dictionary for you to look for to see about terms in escrow. So they really don't pertain, they pertain to your escrow, but not specifically to that property, okay?
Can we provide a sample escrow packet for agents to review? Yes, Mark, thank you for that question. So that's what we're going through here today, is the sample packet, but we're more than happy to send you a copy if that's something you'd like to look through more closely. Absolutely. Yeah. This is literally exactly what your clients get when they're in escrow with All Valley Escrow. And just so you know, every escrow company out there has their own version of these same documents. They really get almost the exact same documents from any escrow company out there. They just look a little bit different. And trust me, even if you're familiar with these documents, you see it on somebody else's forms and it looks a little bit Egyptian and backwards, because when you're so used to seeing your own forms, it can be a little confusing. So just know, really across the board, all escrow companies are going to be sending out these same types of documents. One of our general provisions, and for lack of a better term, it's kind of like boilerplate, right? Just kind of the stuff that explains
Good word.
Yeah.
Good word.
It just kind of explains what escrow is, what our role is. Obviously, a neutral fiduciary third party. That just rolls right off the tongue there.
Nice.
Thank you.
Nice.
This is what we do. This is our role, and anything really specific to your contract, like Tina said, is covered within those first 2.5 pages, and we just pull it verbatim from your purchase contract.
And then, like on page 6 of the information, now we call it general information, which is actually more of a definition of some of the forms that are in there if you don't understand those. FIRPTA laws have to do with if people are registered, what do I call that?
Yeah.
U.S. taxpayers if they're citizens.
Right.
So a lot of those disclosures are in the package, but this explains that form in case anybody wants to know if you have foreign status. That's what I was looking for.
Because understand, it is escrow's job to be the withholding agent on behalf of those clients in escrow. So that is why we need to disclose that role, and that's why we send out those forms throughout the transaction, because we get the lovely duty of actually being the one to withhold the money and pay it on behalf of the client if there is a non-foreign status in the transaction.
So each page of the escrow instructions are signed initialed by the buyers and the sellers. And then the last page is signed by your buyers and your sellers. So that's your basic escrow instructions that they both get. And then there's following forms that are attached that we'll go through.
Perfect. So that's it. As far as your escrow instructions, if you're asking,
right?
Just super easy, just 7 pages. I used to say to my clients, if you can't sleep at night, you pull out those general provisions and you peruse carefully, because some of that boilerplate stuff can get a little dirty. But we'll move on to e-signature, because this is a very important document. And obviously during the time that we've been doing a lot of e-signatures, and I know DocuSign's always been a thing, but never more so than in COVID. So let's talk about our e-signature form.
So this form is a form that we initiated into our package so that we are comfortable and we have all your information that you provided to the buyer or the seller provided to us, giving us authorization to not take a traditional signature, but have DocuSign used. Some people use DocuSign. There's a bunch of different electronic signature companies out there. So this is a general one for escrow to know who these parties are, and that they are authorizing us to use that DocuSign signature in place of a traditional signature. And we just ask for the buyer's name, address, their email, and their signature authorizing us to use DocuSign. So that's once the initial escrow instructions are signed, a lot of this can be DocuSigned, and even some of this can be. But as long as we have this form, we just want the buyers and the sellers to be aware that we're accepting the DocuSign and it's okay, and that we have their authorization to do that.
So is this another form that is verbatim, the buyer and seller get the same exact one?
Correct.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And do we have to have this one signed, wet signature or scan signature, whatever, before we move forward with electronic signatures?
We're supposed to, yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Moving along.
So what, talk about the FIRPTA. And what you need to be concerned about with FIRPTA is if the sellers, we're always talking about the sellers in this, if there are foreign sellers, okay? And what is a foreign seller? It's basically a person that's not, let me read it. It says in general, foreign person is a non-resident alien individual, foreign corporation, foreign trust, or foreign estate, but not a resident alien individual. So there are taxes that are have to be withheld if the seller is a foreigner. So it's really important that we get the information in the seller packet that they sign that says, I'm not a foreigner, and they have an affidavit that they sign. And so what happens is we have to disclose to both parties, the buyer and the seller, if the seller is foreign. So being a third party, we will let the buyer know if there is going to be an issue, but they're totally welcome. And a lot of buyers do say, hey, have they filled out their affidavit? Are they foreigners? Is their tax withheld? Because what happens is on this form, the IRS kind of makes it buyer's responsibility to make sure that that seller was not a foreigner, okay?
So that's why it's important to the buyer, because let's say the seller doesn't disclose and we don't withhold anything, but it comes to light that the seller was a foreign status. Responsibility now has transferred to the new homeowner, which is the buyer, and that responsibility will attach to the buyer for those taxes. So it becomes a very big issue of vulnerability for your buyer, which is why it's disclosed to them that we are getting that information from the seller. It sounds a little backwards that we're telling the buyer all about the seller's foreign status, but the reason we have to in escrow is because that responsibility then becomes the buyer's if we don't.
But the good news.
Oh, good. There's good news.
The good news is and it's a red flag to us when the seller either calls us or they do not fill out the form and stating that they have non-foreign status. So at that point, we contact the agent or the seller direct, figure out the situation, and if there's taxes to be withheld, we get the appropriate forms and they fill them out, and we actually do the withholding. And so we are here, we're a third party, we're neutral. We see that come in, it's a red flag to us. We make sure that it gets satisfied, and then, but we do let the buyer know if there is an issue, but it's just a disclosure. So this is a disclosure telling you, please check, there are taxes that are due if the seller is a foreigner.
And we're kind of like that backstop, right? Like Tina said, we are that neutral third party. We don't represent anybody, specifically. We remain neutral, but we are the backstop for anything that affects either party, right? For making sure those liens are paid off, or making sure the taxes are paid. Like, we don't represent either party, but we kind of represent both, if that makes sense. We just kind of look to protect both by doing our job. That's kind of what escrow's role is. So explained very well. I know FERPTA can get a lot of questions, so feel free to ask if you have any. There's additional notice of the withholding and reporting. Is this CalFERPTA?
That's the CalFERPTA.
Okay,
which
this one's different.
Yeah, CalFERPTA is a little different. CalFERPTA just wants to know about the property, and is the property the seller's principal residence? Is it a 1031? Is it a second home? What is it? Because if it's not, if it doesn't qualify as your principal, or none of the requirements are there, there's got to be withholding from the seller for that also. So this is just another notice to the buyer and the seller. They both get this form to let them know that whatever they claim on the next form, that the 593 form is what it's called, is what distinguishes whether or not there's withholding due from the seller. So
why it's such an important question to know when you're working with a seller that's selling investment property or rental. It is a really important question to ask about the CalFERPTA withholding. And quite often they don't know, which is why you send them to their tax advisor. We are not tax professionals. We are not here to give tax advice. I just encourage you to ask the questions and maybe have a little red flag in your head that goes off if it's not their principal residence that you're selling, because there are tax consequences. Again, escrow is the responsible party for withholding that 3 1/3 or whatever it is now. It was 3 1/3 back when I was in escrow. And the sooner you know the answer to that question, it can be a really significant amount of money for your sellers, and they may not be aware of it. Another really great thing to think about is if you are working with sellers that are selling investment property, it's a great time to talk to them about a 1031 exchange. It's another exception for the CalFERPTA, tax withholding, and then you can help them reinvest that money into another investment property and get 2 deals out of it. So just a thought.
bonus.
Now leave that out there. And again, this one gets signed by both parties.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Fire insurance.
This one's pretty self-explanatory. We just want to know who you picked for your new lender and who is going to be doing the insurance. A lot of times the lenders will handle the insurance, but escrow needs to know who we're using. We want to make sure that it's the company that the buyer wants, and we need that information hopefully within 5 days. Also, even if they're just giving us the name, so that we can reach out and get a quote and get the lost payee information for the new lender. Most lenders are asking for that information up front before the loan's approved. It's not like it used to be where they ask for the insurance on the end, but they're doing it off the front end now. So they want to know, they want to get the insurance information. They want to see what's covered. They want to see the policy, the evidence of insurance. So this is just important to let the buyer know, reach out to whoever you're going to use, tell them you're buying a new property, and they'll get the ball rolling, and then we'll contact them direct. So this is just an information for escrow so that we can get insurance.
And like the point that Tina made, we need this information sooner than later. Sometimes your buyer is still reeling from the fact that they just got their purchase contract accepted and they have not even thought about fire insurance. Please know that if they're getting a loan, it is a very important question and a service they need to start thinking about really quickly. Obviously, you're a great referral resource for them. Put them in touch with a few different, insurance companies and have them start shopping really quickly, because as Tina mentioned, the lenders are really wanting to see that as soon as possible. So this form goes just to our buyer.
Correct.
Unlike our other ones. Ooh, the PCOR.
This is the preliminary change of ownership form, or the PCOR. This form looks a lot worse than it is, but it's really just going to accompany the grant deed to let the assessor's office know what happened. Are they going to reassess? Is it a brand new purchase? What are they using the house for? All of the particulars on why that grant deed was created. And in this instance, it's a sale. So this is your new buyer that's putting their information in. This alerts the assessor, like if you look at the very top, it has a couple just basic questions. Is the property intended as my principal residence? If yes, it gives you the occupancy date. So they need to answer those questions. And if it's your personal residence, in a lot of counties, there is an exemption that applies for being homeowner's exemption. So if you mark yes, then that will trigger them to give you that on the taxes. And there's also an information if they don't want their property taxes to go to the bill, that you can put a different address, a PO box. Maybe you want it just mailed someplace else.
So this form is literally how the assessor knows and answers some of the questions in reassessing the property. Obviously, a resale transaction triggers a reassessment in the state of California.
Right.
These forms are county specific. So LA County, Ventura County, everyone has their own preliminary change of ownership form, which goes out to your buyer. But the answers to these questions are very important. Like Tina mentioned, it will determine whether you get a homeowner exemption form or not. And additional documentation will be sent to you from the county assessor. But please don't allow your buyers to be overwhelmed by so many questions, and know that this is sent directly to the county that home is in for tax assessment purposes, and is very important.
Right. And then it's just a lot of information they like to keep data on. If the price of the property, they like to know that, but that's also on the grant deed as far as the transfer tax. And then they just keep information and data on the property information, what type of home it was, what it's going to be used for, what the condition is. That it doesn't really affect the appraised value or anything. They are just collecting data for their information. So this form has to be completed by the buyer, and then the buyer is at the bottom. The buyer or the transferee signs that, dates it, and puts their phone number and email address. So it looks worse than it is. It's not that bad of a form, but a lot of buyers call us on this. So
lots of questions.
So you know. Yeah.
It's a county form, so I know it might be a little cumbersome at times.
This form is the statement of information, or the confidential information statement. This is in the buyer package and it's in the seller package. And the reason this one is really, really important is the title company needs this. So the title company uses this information to do a search on buyer and seller and on the property to see if any liens, encumbrances, judgments, child support, anything comes up that could affect the transfer of this property. The seller is supposed to have this in within
7 days,
7 days
from acceptance. It's actually stated in your purchase contract. The seller is supposed to have theirs completed within 7 days of acceptance. Almost never happens, but that's supposed to.
Yeah, but reason being, I mean, this is a good reason why you also get a prelim ahead of time. And this form, you can even get this form, a blank form. I can give this to you ahead of time, so you can get it filled out, and we can run we can give it to title. They can run a check. They basically just run their social and their driver's license and their name, and they're going to see if anything comes up. And this is where they're going to find all these items, and this could affect the transfer. So that's why it's really, really important that they do this. And then the buyer also has to fill this out. the title companies are ensuring that everything's free and clear, and they can insure the property. So they just want to have all their information together, check everything out like an insurance policy. And they need this from the buyer too, because they're going to run the buyer to see if there's anything that comes up, liens, child support, anything that could affect the transfer. So important form. It's got a lot of private information on it, and it's got a lot of stuff that's the title company requires. So just know that we need this back in as soon as possible, especially from the seller.
And again, if you have a seller and you're working with them on the listing, it's another one of those forms that you can get up front. If you want to sit with them in their living room when you're going through your listing paperwork, this is another one of those forms that you can have them complete. We can get it submitted to title for you right away. Another benefit of working with All Valley, something that's part of our natural practices that you won't necessarily find at other companies. As soon as that SI, statement of information, comes into us completed by your client, we get it to title immediately. Some companies wait and hang on to it until they send it with the recording package. That was very often common practice, and you're risking a lien popping up at the at the last minute. And so A, have your clients get it back to us quickly. B, All Valley will get it to your title officer and get it cleared as quickly as possible too.
And the last form that we put in the buyer's package is called the vesting worksheet, and this is just basically how they want to hold title. How do they want to be on the grant deed? How do they want to sign their loan docs? So this is the form where they can initiate that. Now, this can be a little confusing for some people. So the second sheet of the vesting amendment has a kind of a brief summary that we got that shows how to hold title. So that's a good reference for them when they're filling out this form to look at that ways of holding title, which is on the back sheet, just to kind of see what the differences are. And we always recommend that if they're confused or if they have a different situation, married, not married, maybe they have trust, maybe they have exes, to check with their tax accountant or if they have a CPA and say, hey, what's the best way to hold title in my situation? California is a community property state. So basically it's right of survivorship in California. Other states are different. So if they're a married couple, a lot of times it's a basic joint tenancy or community property, but we recommend that they check and make sure that they understand the consequences and how it affects them if somebody passes. So it's a good thing to review, this ways of holding title. And then just need to pick how you want to hold title, how you want your name to read. Sometimes when people do the contract, they just want to be Mark Smith, but then when it comes down to it, they'd really like to be Mark, Reginald Smith. They want their whole name. They want to be a single man, whatever it is that you want to hold title. This is where you get the opportunity to put your name as you want it to appear on the county tax records.
So yeah, very important. A lot of times happens a lot. I want a middle initial, or I don't want a middle initial, or I want Marcus, not Mark, right? Like it's kind of like how you want your name formally to read of record. And we get a lot of questions about this form. Like Tina said, we're not going to give advice as to how to choose it because there are tax consequences. We do try to give this chart and give some information and refer them to, their tax professionals.
And the only other concern that I have on the vesting amendment is, does your ID match? If they're getting a loan, then their ID has to have, if they're going to put their middle name on the loan docs, their middle name needs to be on your driver's license or your passport. So keep in mind, and we do tell buyers when they call in, you can have whatever you want on there, however you need to prove it. So if you have a loan doc and your loan docs and you're signing, that notary needs to see that that is who you are. So your name doesn't have to be exact. But if you're going to put your middle name in there, your middle name needs to be on the driver's license or the passport, whatever that you're using for identification. It's got to be documented.
Very important. And a lot of times there's marriages or divorce, and there's ways for us to clarify that with people. And so when in doubt, call. Chris did mention in the chat, which I appreciate, this vesting worksheet, this chart right here that naturally attaches to our instruction, can also be found on our website, allvalleyescrow.com, under our educational flyers. So if you just want to have the chart for your own reference, or you want to use it in your conversations or give it to your, keep it in your buyer presentation packages, by all means, feel free to go to our website and print that out because it is there for your use as well. So, all right, that was the buyer package. That wasn't so
easy,
painful.
Right?
Easy, super easy. We're gonna jump over to the seller package here, which is going to look very similar in some documentation.
A lot of it's very similar. We do the cover sheet. We do tell you at the bottom, there's a few items in there that need to be notarized. In this case, it's just the grant deed. It's listed at the bottom. The rest of the paperwork does not need to be a notary, but the grant deed has to be notarized. We are notaries here at All Valley. If you want to send them over here, call us, make an appointment, and come in. We'll do it. It's part of your escrow fee. It's not an extra fee. Sometimes, especially with COVID, they're finding that they can't find a notary. They're usually at UPS stores or parcel post places, your bank. I don't know if they'll charge you or not, but here at All Valley, we don't. So you can come on in here and we'll do the grant deed for you. So that is one item that needs to be notarized if it's in a trust, if the seller's in a trust. In this case, it wasn't. There's also a trust certification that has to be completed by the seller or the owner that needs to be notarized also. So in this package too, we do the same form. We do the wire fraud advisory and the encrypted email that the seller needs to sign, just like the buyer did. And the escrow instructions are the same. So it's the same thing. Buyer and seller sign the exact same escrow instructions. So we already went through those. So it's pretty basic, yeah. The next one is the instructions for the commission.
This is an important one.
This is where the seller authorizes us.
I'm getting there. I'm scrolling.
Yeah, there you go. This will list the commissions paid by the selling agent and the list to the selling agent and the listing agent, and authorized by the seller. So it's important that the seller know what they're paying. It's important that the seller sign this so that you get paid. Basically, pretty important.
Very important. I would say this is one you might want to put on the top of the stack and have them sign first. No, just kidding.
Yeah. And then we do have the e-signature form in there also, which is the same form that was in the buyer's pack, authorizing us to accept electronic signatures.
Perfect.
So the seller has some obligation as far as the tax reporting because they're selling the property. So this form is in the seller's package. It's just a certification for real estate reporting. This tells us who's selling the property, what's the percent of ownership, their social security number for the tax purposes, and then a forwarding address to let us know where they're going to be moving to. So a lot of times the sellers have split interest. If they're joint tenants, sometimes they are reporting different percents. It's whatever their situation is. Husband and wife, sometimes they do 50-50 and they each do their own taxes. If they're doing it jointly, they'll do 100% on one taxpayer as a primary, and secondary, there's zero. But it just depends on the individual situation. So this is what tells us how we're going to create the 1099 for reporting to the IRS at closing. So it is very important, taxpayer's name, social, the percent of ownership, and if there's another taxpayer, number 2, if there's more, we just keep going down the list and get ownership for how many people are on title. It does ask the sale price. It asks if it's an exchange, and also just what kind of taxpayer they are. Some people, individuals, trust, corporation, whatever it is. So this form is necessary for reporting, and it's in the package, and all sellers have to sign.
Just like it's our responsibility to withhold, it's also our responsibility to report. We have a lot of responsibilities in escrow.
Right.
So that's why we get these fun tax forms.
So we talked about the CalFIRPTA. This is the form that the seller tells us how they're using the property to see if it's exempt, if there's withholding, how we're reporting it. So this is a form for just the Franchise Tax Board, which is the state of California. The seller fills out the information at the top as far as the seller transferee information. They put in the ownership percent, it's 100%, or how many people are filling this out. It's got to obviously equal 100%. So maybe we have 2, 3, 4 of these. But if the probably 50% of the time, it's their primary residence. Now, if it's their primary residence and they mark in section 3 that it qualifies as the seller's primary residence,
right here,
1 and 2, if either one of those are checked, then what happens, they're exempt from the sale, withholding through escrow, okay? So this is important because a lot of people think they don't owe, they do owe, they don't know. If it's a principal residence, really, if 1 or 2 is marked, there's no exemption. There's also options on this form to, if it's not your primary residence, that you can elect a different withholding, or if you're a corporation, there's no withholding. So these are all questions that pertain to a particular seller, so they just need to answer them. We do recommend that they check with their tax preparer or CPA, because and see what applies to them. It's really a pretty easy form. If to people that understand it, like your tax accountant or your
Right.
CPA, and they can direct you and help you very easily. So it is a form that we need. If nothing applies and there's no exemption, we can do the 3 1/3, because a lot of time it's a rental property and they're not doing a 1031. And if it's a rental property, there's taxes due, so they can tell us to withhold, and we can do that. So it just depends on the individual's situation,
Right.
and they really need to take it to their tax people if they have one.
And just so you know, this form has changed a little bit throughout the years. It's always modified. It's always changing. It used to be yes or no. You used to have 2 boxes. It used to be true or false. You have 1 box, and the instruction is to mark the box if it applies. So you basically read the questions and you mark the box if it's a yes. If the response is a no, you don't mark the box. You literally leave the form blank and sign it at the bottom, which feels a little unnatural to be signing a blank form, but that's literally the instruction to escrow, that you do not qualify for any exemptions and withholding needs to be done, which in most cases is 3 1/3 right off the top, which can be quite a large amount of money, or you can do an alternative calculation with your CPA off your gain. There's a whole bunch of different formulas, but understand, like Tina said, if it's their principal residence, have them mark box 1 or 2, whichever one applies, sign that form and submit it in.
Okay. And then the next form we talked about was foreign status.
Oh, is this the calculation form?
Yeah,
This, okay.
it's 3
This
pages.
is all part of the 593 form.
Correct.
This is part of the calculations that they decide they have to do those. Again, CPA, tax person for that purpose.
We talked about the foreign status. If the seller is a foreigner, there are taxes that have to be paid to the Internal Revenue, IRS. So this is where escrow is told that they have non-foreign status. Okay, they're stating that they're not foreigners. They put in their tax ID number, they put in their address, and it's an affidavit. So they're telling us what their situation is, and if they have non-foreign status, then there's no taxes that are withheld. So this is an important form. It is in the packages for the agents at the closing. If the buyer wants it, they can have it. We block out the social security number to other people.
Do you block it out to the agents as well?
Yes.
So the agents receive a copy.
You don't get a full copy.
And they do sign this under penalty of perjury. Understand that this is a document where they are affirming that what they're stating is true, because again, should it come to light that they were not telling the truth, that onus then falls on the buyer, and they're of course going to come back to the intermediary, being your escrow company, and we have these forms in escrow for that reason. Also why copies get sent to you at closing as well.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And then the other 2 forms are just the same as in the buyer package. There's the form about the foreign status, the FERPTA, and then also the California withholding, which is the exact same as in the buyer's packages, that there's taxes due if it's not their primary residence. The next document's a grant deed. That's transfers title. It needs to be notarized by your seller. Again, they can come here to our office, or they can take it to any notary public in whatever state they're in. Actually, a notary public can be from any state. It is held in escrow until we're ready to send it to the county for recording. A lot of sellers will say, well, I don't want to do this right now.
Right, we get that a lot.
And they don't have to. I mean, a lot of them, as convenience, they want to get it signed and get it in. And we just hold it in escrow as your neutral third party. If there's an issue or the seller's not comfortable with that, we're okay with that, and we will call them in, 3 to 5 days before closing and say it's time. You need to sign this document. But most of them are pretty good, knowing that we're going to keep it, we're going to hold on to it, and they just need to sign it before a notary and send it to us, and it stays in the file until we're ready to transfer.
And there's the notary acknowledgement on the second page. I will say I've had clients in the past say to me, well, why would I sign this deed and give it to you when I haven't received my money, right? It's kind of like that situation where your sellers are like, but wait, they haven't done their part yet. I don't want to do my part. And like Tina said, that's a very common occurrence. So understand that is exactly the role for a neutral third party, an escrow company. This document goes to a party who has, the fraud protections in place to keep it safe, who literally holds it in the file. It goes nowhere. Mm-hmm. If your file cancels and this has already been executed, it is shredded and destroyed. It's not like it's in a vulnerable position. And so if you need us to talk your clients through why it's okay to execute their grant deed, even though they haven't received their net proceeds, we're happy to do that. And we do understand that it can feel a little bit like, whoa, wait, I just agreed to sell it to them, and now you're making me sign my life life away.
We have 30 days.
Yeah,
40 days.
exactly. It can
And
feel
it's
a bit
fine.
like that.
And we can do that. But, you know, the more we get done up front, as you guys all know, the better. So if we can get that up front and have it in the file ready to go, great. And you know, I've also had sellers that say, you know what, if this cancels, I want my grant deed back. Fine, they can have it. I write void on it and I give it back to them. So it's not a document that's floating around whether we close or not.
Right. Awesome.
And then the next information is the information sheet that we need from the sellers. This is what tells us what kind of loans are against the property. Do they have a first trustee? Do they have a second trustee, third, fourth, whatever they've got against the property? This number one helps us match up with the prelim to see if
Our
indeed
liens match.
we match and we have enough deeds, because we've got sellers that sometimes think they don't owe anything, and we find out there's a deed of trust on the prelim and they maybe probably don't owe anything, but it was never reconveyed or removed. So this gives us the information we need and the authorization at the bottom to get a demand, get a payoff, contact your homeowners association, find out if there's solar on the property. It gives us authorization to talk on the seller's behalf and get the necessary documents we need to transfer title. So it's really important, number one, the deeds are the most important if they have loans on the property. We like to get them in. We like to see if they match with what the seller has told us. Are the balances, you know, similar? Are we able to get the demands? There are some people that took out a loan, gosh, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and either it never got reconveyed and we have to search. If there's any kind of problem that we need this information right away so that we can do our job and get a release if we need to and get a payoff.
Right. And a lot of sellers want to know, well, what are my net proceeds? What am I walking away from? We literally can't do those calculations until we know what we're paying. And we don't know what we're paying until they provide us with this form and tell us who their current mortgage is with. So, you know, Bank of America isn't going to talk to Tina Patronette from All Valley on behalf of, you know, Mark Smith, William Smith, whatever his name is, because of the fraud protections in place that are so heavy. They literally ask to see a copy of this form before they will speak to us. And so we can't get the ball rolling in your escrow very smoothly without these kinds of things in place. And I just want to kind of reiterate the importance of your seller completing this information and getting it to us as soon as possible. Very often, same thing, they'll have a home equity line that they took out 15 years ago to put in a pool. They've paid it off. They might not owe anything on it, and they've totally forgotten that it's even sitting on their property. We have to remove it. Title has the responsibility to clear any liens, even though there may be a zero balance, before passing the property on to the buyer. And title can't do that until we have that information. So if your seller has questions on these forms, again, please know that we're here to walk them through.
The one other thing we do use this form for, a lot of times the deed against the original deed of trust that was taken out was, let's say, Bank of America.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when we get this form back, they're not paying Bank of America anymore. Their loan has been sold 1, 2, 3 times, and now they're paying Mr. Cooper or you know, Chase.
Right.
So this form will tell us too, so we don't go running around in circles looking for information that, hey, I'm not with Bank of America anymore. Now I'm with UWM or some other bank. So they will tell us who to contact and give us the authorization. So very important.
Yeah, because when their loans get sold or transferred to a new lender, your prelim isn't updated. Your prelim I shouldn't say never, but an assignment is very rarely recorded. And so we have no idea with that information until your seller lets us know.
And again, the statement of information is in there again that we need. So it's in the buyer and the seller package. It just needs to be completed so that title can do their search.
Awesome. And quite often, please know, if you have a seller by the name of William Smith in LA County, there are going to be liens. There's going to be thousands of them. So another thing to keep in mind is if you're working with a client who has a very common name like Mark Brown or John Smith or something like that, more often than not, there's going to be an SI matter that shows up on your prelim anyway. So the sooner the better, as with all of our documents here.
And the last form.
Yay! Where to send my money?
Which is the most important step, right? It's just instructions on what to do with your proceeds. The seller can have us hold them. They can get a check. We can wire. We can send to another escrow company. There's so many things that we can do. And it's all part of the escrow fee. We don't charge an individual wire fee if they do want it wired. We actually suggest wires. The money gets there quicker as long as we've got valid information. It's usually same day if we get our wire out by 3 o'clock. Sometimes we run into situations where people want to check and they take that check to their bank and the bank says we're going to put a hold on it. It is a trust account. There are funds in there, but it just depends on your
Bank.
situation
Right.
with your bank
Right.
and your standing with your account. Well, people will hold it. And sometimes we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
They'll
So
put like a
that-
10-day hold on it. I mean, you won't have
Right.
access to that money right away, whereas a wire is more often than not immediately good.
Right. But there's a lot of people that like to see the actual check, and we can do that. So just keep in mind that if we close on a Friday, sometimes the sellers won't get their money if it's a wire, if it's after the cutoff time. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But however, if you get a check, they're going to put a hold on it possibly. So you're almost better off doing the wire, and it'll just show up on Monday morning,
Right.
into your account. But and if they're buying a house, whatever they're doing, we can draw instructions and send those proceeds partially, whatever the seller wants. We try and make it convenient and nice for the seller, that if they have a couple accounts they want to put their money in, or maybe they want to send it to their purchase and keep the rest. These are all on this, and it'll also tell us if we need to generate any other forms or contact any other bank to get information. But we do try and get out proceeds same day. So if we record today, we try as the best we can to get all that information and get the wire out today. So keep in mind that it's, we do the best we can to get it out fast. Okay.
Awesome.
So that's why I say, if you can help your seller get any of these paperworks in faster, it helps us. If you want us to reach out, we're here for you. It just depends on the situation for that particular person, but we're here to help. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. I know this was extensive, and we're so grateful we had you with us. If you have any other questions, if anything pops back into your mind, like what was that form again? If you want hard copies of these documents, we're more than happy to email you samples. Please reach out to your All Valley Escrow officer. We are here to work with you to make the process as seamless and easy as possible. We know there's a lot going on in this market today. It's a privilege to be your escrow resource. So thanks for joining us today. We hope to see you in escrow.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.